When Mission Space opened in 2003, it was supposed to be the next generation of thrill ride, an experience so immersive and realistic that you'd feel what it's like to be an astronaut blasting into orbit. It promised cutting-edge technology, NASA consultation, and a price tag north of $100 million. It was supposed to be the future of EPCOT, a bold step forward that embodied Michael Eisner's era of bigger, faster, and more thrilling attractions. But almost immediately, something went wrong. Guests stumbled off the ride disoriented, nauseous, and shaken. Some required medical attention. Others swore they'd never ride again. Within months, headlines about the ride's intensity began to overshadow the engineering triumphs behind it. And soon, Disney would modify the experience to make it more tolerable. So what happened? How did one of the most advanced rides Disney ever built end up being too much? Are people just singling this ride out? Is it truly Disney's most overly intense attraction? Does intensity equal thrill? Today we're blasting off to determine what exactly happened to Mission Space, and how exactly Disney built their most intense attraction ever. The story of Mission Space actually goes back quite a while. It all started with Phase 2 of EPCOT, Horizons, which opened in 1983. It embodied the park's optimistic vision of the future, a continuation of the narrative established on Spaceship Earth. A look forward at the future of humanity and all it could accomplish. With massive sets, animatronics, and a sweeping narrative about humanity's future, Horizons was a slow-moving, inspirational experience. It definitely didn't throw you around or test your limits. It invited you to dream. It wasn't intense in the slightest. It was a ride for everyone, and a beautifully optimistic one at that. Horizons was billed as a major attraction at the park. However, it was yet another slow-moving omnimover attraction in a park filled with them. I bring this up because this is a major reason why Mission Space ended up the way it did. Now, we will discuss whether it was successful in a bit, but it did come out of the mindset that Disney parks were full of experiences that were considered not thrilling. By the 1990s, under Michael Eisner's leadership, Disney was changing. One of the specific themes of the Eisner era was to emphasize more intense and thrilling attractions in all of the Disney parks. Eisner wanted Disney parks to feel exciting again, especially EPCOT, which had gained a reputation as the quote-unquote educational park, as if that's like bad or something. He looked to rides like Space Mountain and Splash Mountain as templates for a new kind of EPCOT, one that could appeal to families and teenagers. Test Track became the first major step in this direction. It replaced the aging World of Motion with a high-speed automotive testing experience. Despite technical delays and a bumpy development, it was a hit, fast, fun, and yes, still educational. It proved EPCOT could embrace thrills without losing its identity. It was thrilling, but not intense, a high-speed attraction that was relatively light on any real forces. Both families and teenagers loved and still love it to this day. It's a staple of EPCOT, and in my opinion, a great example of what an EPCOT thrill ride should look like. Meanwhile, across the way, Horizons was aging, costing a ton to maintain and occupying a large plot of land. Imagineers would once again be tasked with adding a thrilling attraction that supported EPCOT's vision, while catering to the thrill-hungry crowd. However, something was already in development for Horizons' plot. The dream of taking EPCOT guests into outer space didn't begin with Mission Space. In fact, it dates nearly 25 years earlier. Among the earliest concepts for the park's future world was an ambitious space pavilion, intended to sit alongside attractions like Horizons and Universe of Energy. Imagineers developed a concept that would have placed guests into a massive spherical spacecraft that would use a vertical circle vision theater to create a mind-bending 360 trip through the cosmos. The ride film would take guests soaring through the galaxy and deep into the mysteries of the universe. It was less a dark ride and more of a fully immersive cosmic voyage. But as spectacular as that sounded, the concept was indeed ahead of its time and its budget. The technology to convincingly execute it just didn't exist. And as Epcot Center's construction costs ballooned, the Space Pavilion was gradually pushed farther down the timeline. Eventually, the dream of the Leviathan was quietly phased out entirely. Still, the desire to bring a space exploration to Epcot never disappeared. Throughout the 80s and 90s, Imagineers kept revisiting the idea, experimenting with new approaches. In the early 1990s, a concept called Journeys into Space proposed a more educational dark ride focused on humanity's next great adventure beyond Earth. Then came 1996, A Journey Beyond What Is Known, a dramatic, cinematic experience that would have used the existing Horizons Pavilion as its show building. Each iteration circled back to the same central idea. EPCOT deserved a modern attraction that captured the wonder of exploring the unknown. By the way, if you love talking about canceled concepts at theme parks, you should totally check out my other channel called E-Ticket Archives, where we dive in much deeper into the Space Pavilion that never came to EPCOT. Okay, commercial over. So when the opportunity came to finally replace Horizons, the timing felt right to resurrect the Space Pavilion concept, this time as a thrill ride. Around the turn of the millennium, Imagineers proposed a new attraction and an accompanying script called Mission Space. The pitch imagined EPCOT guests not just observing space travel, but becoming astronauts themselves, experiencing the raw physical sensations of launch, orbit, and landing. The idea aligned perfectly with the spirit of the Eisner era. Where earlier EPCOT rides inspired, this one would immerse. Guests wouldn't simply dream what it was like to go to space, they would actually feel what it was like. From there, the project moved quickly. Disney engineers designed an unprecedented ride system based on a centrifuge, similar to those used in astronaut training. It would spin guests fast enough to generate up to 2.5 Gs of sustained force, simulating the sensation of a rocket launch. The way I describe it is like a gravitron at the state fair, but with a bunch of expensive simulators attached to it on the end. Each rider sits in a compact capsule facing a personal screen, creating the illusion of blasting off into space. It would be forceful, for sure, but lots of rides are forceful and popular, right? The project was shrouded in mystery, and people's hype grew as to what exactly Imagineers were working on. By the time Mission Space finally opened in 2003, Disney hailed it as a spiritual successor to the long-lost Space Pavilion. What had begun as a Leviathan, an impossible dream of the 1970s, had finally taken form. But instead of a sweeping cinematic journey through the stars, it had become something far more visceral. And as guests would soon find out, it was also far more intense than anyone could have imagined. Stepping into Mission Space, you actually get a taste for what the original EPCOT Space Pavilion could have felt like. I've actually always enjoyed the queue personally. Guests are assigned to a training team of 4 and strapped into your capsule. The door closes, the lights dim, and suddenly you're inches away from your screen. The countdown begins, the engine roars, and the centrifuge starts a-spinning. The first time you ride it, the experience is shocking. The launch sequence presses your body firmly into the seat. For a moment, it feels like you're really ascending into orbit. It's effective, powerful, and genuinely intense. But then, the forces don't stop. As the ride continues, the spinning creates intense, sustained pressure on your chest and head. The capsule tilts and banks, and if you dare to look away from the screen in front of you, it can trigger dizziness or nausea. Some actually experience it for the rest of the day. The ride continues with a journey around the moon and eventually landing on a simulated Mars base. Meanwhile, the centrifuge spins at certain times and acts as a simulator at other times, certainly testing guests' endurance. Disney posted warning signs everywhere, advising guests with heart conditions, motion sickness, or anxiety to sit out. But despite the precautions, reports of illness flooded in. Some guests threw up after riding, others fainted. Tragically, 2 separate incidents over the following years resulted in guest fatalities linked to pre-existing health conditions, sparking widespread media coverage. Disney couldn't ignore the controversy. The attraction's reputation shifted from Disney's most intense ride to the ride that made people sick. Families began to avoid it altogether. For a park that once prided itself on accessibility and storytelling, Mission Space had become an outlier, a ride that alienated the very guests it was meant to impress. So ultimately, what exactly happened here? Is it just that a modern thrill ride wasn't appropriate for Disney Park, or is there a deeper issue to Mission Space? When we examine rides that don't work here on the channel, there's usually some major issue with roughness or pacing, or even a ride that is lacking in forces and therefore not thrilling in general. The strange issue with Mission Space is that it achieves exactly what it was intended to achieve. The ride is well themed, the technology is sophisticated, the story is fine, And there are definitely intense forces. But Jake, there are way more forceful coasters around the state. So, what's the problem? I think the answer actually lies in a ride down the road. Well, a coaster. The Incredible Hulk coaster at Islands of Adventure. Just give me a second, I'll explain. Hulk is considered by many to be the most intense ride in the state. I personally think Kumba is, but we'll just say it's Hulk. The coaster is a frenzy of positive G's, the forces that push you into your seat. Where Mission Space hits 2.5 G's, Hulk hits a whopping 4 G's. And yet, Hulk is considered an icon of Universal and praised for its thrilling experience. Mission Space, meanwhile, is not considered an icon of EPCOT. Why? Well, I think it comes down to the design of Mission Space itself. Guests weren't accustomed to sustained positive G-forces, and many find the sensation overwhelming. Where Hulk has an open-air experience with moments of positive Gs, it also balances those moments with negative Gs, moments that lift you out of your seat. Mission Space is all positive Gs and continuous. On paper, that sounds thrilling, but intensity for intensity's sake is actually the big misstep for this attraction. Mission Space didn't fail because it was poorly built. It failed because it misunderstood what makes a thrill ride work. Intensity in and of itself isn't the same thing as thrill. Great thrill rides use intensity as a tool, a way to create contrast, release, and emotion. Hulk begins with an intense launch of 2 Gs, but then immediately hits a 0 G roll where guests experience negative Gs. There is a certain artful balance to the experience. But Jake, you're not being fair. One is a coaster and one is a simulated experience. Well, we can also contrast Mission Space with another space simulator, Star Tours. There are moments where the ride on Star Tours jumps into hyperspace. The moments do push you back into your seat, but this is achieved by the ride simply tilting backwards. And the forces on your body are minimal. It's really just an illusion. Mission Space skipped all that. From the moment you launch, it's full throttle. There's no rhythm, no balance, and no break. It's a constant assault of force and pressure. In its quest to feel real, Mission Space forgot to feel fun. EPCOT guests didn't want to endure a simulated astronaut training. They wanted to imagine it. Contrast with Horizons that invited guests to dream about space travel. Mission Space demanded they survive it. Now, to their credit, in 2006, they added a green team version of the ride, which removed the centrifuge spinning entirely. The orange team kept the original experience for thrill seekers, but the safer version allowed for more guests to ride. So, did that improve things? Well, even the non-spinning version still has a dark claustrophobic feeling of being trapped. Again, this is a huge contrast to the aforementioned Star Tours, and definitely a huge contrast to nearby Soarin'. The green version of Mission Space is neither forceful nor thrilling at this point. It just kind of is existing. Today, Mission Space stands as a reminder of a rare misstep in Disney's pursuit of innovation. It's an engineering marvel, no doubt, but also a cautionary tale. Disney tried to build the ultimate thrill ride and ended up creating something that was simply too much. The irony is that Horizons is often remembered more than Mission Space, and Mission Space is currently operating. On paper, Horizons is the less thrilling concept, a slow-moving journey through a showcase of what the future could be with animatronics. But that's just the thing. Horizons unlocked a deeper experience within riders that spurred them on to think about the future in ways they hadn't. The idea of space travel is very exciting, dare I say, thrilling. But in actual reality, space travel is dangerous and only for a select few that can endure years of training with the extremes of what the human body can handle. Mission Space attempts to give us a small sample of what that is like, and guests gave a resounding, "No thanks, I'm good." Intensity alone doesn't make a ride great or memorable. It is simply an ingredient in a much larger recipe for success. Some rides are thrilling, but not the least bit forceful. EPCOT is a great example of this. Spaceship Earth, Living with the Land, and other slow-moving attractions still pull a hefty queue line at times. Why? They're thrilling, but in their storytelling. They're unapologetically committed to their premise, and they invite people to think and feel different about their purpose. And perhaps this was the biggest problem with Mission Space all along. Disney was looking to build the ultimate thrill ride by looking beyond what made EPCOT great in the first place. Everyone loves to imagine what it would be like to travel to space, but I'm not sure anyone actually wants to feel what it's really like. Perhaps Mission Space, when it's gone, will be looked at more fondly. Nostalgia tends to do that to us. But for now, it's Disney's most intense attraction, daring guests to see if they can keep up with the grueling demands of space travel. There's no other attraction in the world like Mission Space. And in terms of sheer intensity, perhaps that's a good thing. Are you a fan of Mission Space? Let me know down below. And as always, remember rule number 5, relax and enjoy the ride. Thanks for watching.